Re-elected. NABJ's 22nd president gets a second term. Black News Channel's president takes us inside the culturally competent newsroom. More and more colleges make vaccines a must. A look inside those stories coming up on NABJ News. Hello, everyone. I am Nicole Majette, one of the hosts of today's Talkback. It's been a great week for NABJ student projects. For our broadcast today, we'll be talking about stories reported by NABJ students and how we handled them. And it's gonna get real.
And I'm your other host, Sheila Hodges.
The numbers are in. 531 for Dorothy Tucker, equating to 83% of votes. 111 for Manny Smith, giving him 17%. The presidential election has come to a close, and President Dorothy Tucker has been re-elected as NABJ president.
Joining us now, we have reporters Yao Bonsu and Deidre Montague, who both cover the presidential race. They're joining us today with a conversation with newly elected President Dorothy Tucker. President Tucker, what is on your heart right now?
It's bursting. If I were not so dark, you would see all the blush. I mean, I have just been smiling for the last hour or so since the results came in. I'm ecstatic. I'm honored. The members obviously spoke. What it says is that they believed in me. And I'm grateful. I'm really, truly grateful.
President Tucker, I wanted to talk to you. One of the things that I noticed during the press conference that you had today was you talked about that many of our members are students and that students also are not able to vote. Can you talk about why that is, and will that change in the future since that might help the numbers increase for voting?
That's a good question, and I don't know that I can answer that. I honestly don't know why it is. So I have to be very truthful with you. I haven't looked into our forefathers, what were they thinking when they decided that students should not be able to vote. And, sometimes things, rules are laid out based on the past. So what I think that, I will say is that, if students come to us, this is a question that is coming up, I think it's worth looking at what was the why behind it, and does it still make sense for us to do this?
President Tucker, you mentioned that the voters have spoken, the organization has spoken, but one issue is that not enough members of the organization spoke. So outside of students, can you talk to us about what efforts you look to implement from now on to make sure that voter turnout is increasing each election cycle?
Well, I mean, let's just put it in perspective. When I say the voters have spoken, 531 of them voted to keep me in place to 111. That's 5-1. So of those who voted, 5-1 said they wanted me to continue leading this organization. In terms of what do we do to make sure we see more people come out to vote, I think that's something we seriously need to look at. However, let's just look at the history. It is always important as journalists to review history and to look at the past and to consider the facts. This is not the first time that we have had only 600 or so people vote. Not at all. This is probably my fourth race, in the last few years. Every time the numbers have been just around 600. That's pretty consistent. So the question is why? If you look at the number of eligible voters, we need to do this breakdown, and I'm really curious, what is the breakdown? Because what you have to consider is that sometimes the numbers are low for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that people did not register in time to be eligible to vote. You had to be a full member, a paid member by July 1st. Every year we have a deadline. And if you don't make that deadline, then you cannot vote in the election. So we have 4,100 members. And the question is, how many really made that deadline? All right, so now you take that percentage of that number that actually probably made the cutoff and they are eligible because they paid their dues. Of those numbers, how many are students? How many are academic representatives? How many are public relations? You know, all of those numbers are within that total that has signed up and were paid members, but they may not have been eligible to vote because they are students or academic reps or whatever. So that's something that we need to look at. But more importantly, you know, I think it's time for us to ask our members, why didn't you vote? I will tell you, when I have asked that question in the past, the answers that have come up with is as well, you know, we get so many emails from NABJ, and by the time the election comes, then the emails are buried and we can't find them. Okay. So what we did this year was send out the voting email every 2 or 3 days. So it would always be at the top of your inbox. So, you know, we responded, and this was our solution to that. So now we need to ask our members, what else can we do? You know, I think instead of us just constantly complaining about it, you know, we need to look for a solution. Why didn't you vote? And more importantly, what can we do to make it easier? What can we do to encourage you to cast that ballot?
To that point, in some of his remarks tonight, Manny Smith mentioned apathy for members who don't feel connected, people feeling underrepresented, overlooked. In fact, so much so that we had one of our reporters do an in-depth story on the LGBTQ community when it comes to NABJ as an example. But how much do you think that contributed to the low voter turnout?
I don't think that contributed very much at all. In fact, I disagree with Manny, his assessment that there is apathy within the organization, because, you know, when I look at the numbers, you know, I see a huge, overwhelming response to the webinars that we had. You know, we'll hold a webinar and 200 or 300 people will show up, and we had like 50 of them. You know, and I hear from members, and members responded to our cause for the Black press grants. You know, members competed to get a spot on our Entrepreneur Network Academy so they could join a class in September. You know, the response to so much of what we ask for, the numbers are high and they're overwhelming. So I don't agree with that. You know, I don't think that there is very much apathy. You know, if you want to look at the turnout of this election, then, you know, I mean, it's not to say that you don't have any, but I don't think it's overwhelming. I think, you know, there are probably some people who may feel as if they are not, their voices are muted. And, you know, that's in any organization, that is in any family, that is in any life. So as the president of this organization, I work overtime, you know, to make sure that any member who feels that way, that, you know, I make them feel better and I address their concerns. You know, what I said to you the other day in the meeting, you know, you brought up an issue and you said you'd heard this and this was happening. And I said, hadn't come to my desk, bring it to me. You know, if there is a concern, then bring it to me. Because if you look at my response, every time someone has said, we have a concern about this, I address it and I find a solution, you know? So that is the way that I operate. So if I know about it, I will take care of it. And that's the same thing that I say to, you know, all of those members who are feeling that way. I want our members to feel respected. I want them to feel valued. And if they have an issue, you know, I think, and I hope they know, they can come to me.
Can you talk to us about what one of your priorities are this term?
Oh, girl, the list is long. The list is very long. Um, you know, when I took over, when I came into office 2 years ago now, I had an agenda. And when the pandemic hit, I had to pivot. There were so many things on my list that I could not address because I had to stop what I was doing and respond to the furloughs, you know, respond to the layoffs that were happening and figure out how to take care of our members, you know, which is why we quickly developed a relief fund and gave our members, without very many questions, anywhere from $250 to $2,000 each, for those who asked, to pay their student loans, to pay their rent, you know, to pay their mortgage, you know, and then we had the mental stress of a season of protest that was going on, you know, so, and there was a crazy election. It was one thing after the other. So many of the things that I wanted to do, I couldn't do that first term. And for me, that's one of the reasons I fought so hard to win this election, because I wanted to continue the work. What is that work? One of the things that I want to do is do a report card on this industry. I want to collect data and survey the television and the digital and the print publications, and find out how many of those managers are Black, how many of them are in real power positions, what are the diversity numbers, and then I'd like to do a survey so that we can collect that information. That's one thing that's very important to me, because as an investigative journalist, data is key. You know, when I sit in these meetings with many of these media representatives and the CEOs and the publishers, you know, they throw out their numbers and they say, well, you know, we have this many and this many. And I want to be able to say, no, 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 because I have the facts. This is what you have. This is what you need. And I need those numbers so that I can come back 6 months later. And when they say, well, you know, now these numbers are higher, we have the same numbers and the numbers are more, I can say, well, yeah, the numbers may be more, but you lost 3 people in top management, because we know who those people are. So that is the one thing that I want to do. I want to address the systemic issues that exist in our newsrooms that lead to the racial disparities that our members experience, that lead to the pay inequity that our members experience. In order to do that, again, you need to collect the facts. You know, I've reached out to the unions, the News Writers Guild, in AFTRA, and asked them to help me in terms of finding out what are our members getting paid versus what are our white counterparts getting paid. You know, it frustrates me that many times our salaries are lower. You know, this is what I hear from our members, and these are the things that I want to address. So, you know, what you're going to see in this second term is more of an attack of the root of the problems. You know, we've been very fortunate this last couple of years, especially this last year after the murder of George Floyd, that we've seen some promotions and we've seen some hires. But the truth of the matter is that so much has not changed in these newsrooms. You know, the marquee media companies, you know, they promote and they put out the PR releases and, you know, the big hires and stuff. But there is that middle ground, and there is that small market where our members are still suffering. You know, and even sometimes in the large markets, our members are still suffering because sometimes media managers think that if they put out a pretty picture here, you know, they promote somebody here, then we aren't aware that those who are in the trenches are still not doing that well. So those are the things that I will address in the second term.
Well, President Tucker, we look forward to seeing all the work that you do, and we wish you the best in all of this and your upcoming term. So thank you so much for joining us. It was great to see you, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You guys did a great job. I have to watch it again. My audio was a little off, so it was kind of jerky, but I do intend to sit back and watch everything, as you might expect, between the election and just kind of pop in and everywhere. I didn't get a chance to sit down and watch as much as I want to, but I will do it, and I'll offer you some feedback. So thank you.
Takeda is a global biopharmaceutical company committed to developing innovative therapies. And for 239 years, our main focus has been answering one question: how can we do more for our patients?
And change this world for the better.
We are the chosen ones.
We're going to have a conversation about natural hair. And joining us today, we have Miss Kiana Stevenson. So ladies, as you know, natural hair has been a big topic for the past couple of years, particularly in journalism. And so, I'm wearing my natural hair right now, so I'm very excited about this conversation. So I guess the first thing I'd like to discuss is, so reading this story, what stood out to you guys the most?
I would definitely say for me, what was super impactful was how Chloe touched on the history of hair, because people think, it's just hair. It's not that serious, or it's something that's just so minuscule, but it's actually a part of our culture. It's
Right.
a part of our identity as Black women, like protective styles, natural hair. These are things that have been around since the Egyptians, like millenniums of African culture. Braids mean and symbolize so many different things. Dreads symbolize so many different things: rank, wealth, religion. And just even as Black women, like the names of these different hairstyles mean so many different things, and who to go to get these styles, and what they should look like, what they should not look like, what they should feel like, like there's so much that goes into the dialogue of hair. And I just love how Chloe really touched on that history, because it is so much more than just some strands that come out of your scalp. Like, it's culture.
For sure. I mean, that immediately reminded me of something my mom used to remind me of all the time. She's like, Sheila, do not let people touch your hair. It's not just hair. There's a lot more meaning behind it. So what about, wait, say that again.
I say amen. Amen.
Yes. And so what about you, Nicole?
No, definitely. I have to agree with Kiana. I mean, it just goes back to culture. I mean, we talk about the hair salon, and what comes along with that. You're in there for hours getting your hair done, whether you're getting a perm, a press, braids, anything. Like, you're going to be in there for some time. And you're going to some gossip. Like, that's just what goes along. So I think just that, there's so much culture behind the strands that come out of our head, and how much it really means, and, the significance of it.
Right. No, I totally agreed. I think that's why I love that there's such a push for that in the journalism field, because of course, like for me personally, I feel like when people are watching the news, like that's one of the first places where they're forming their perceptions about other people, about other cultures. So I absolutely love that we're pushing for, news anchors to be able to wear their hair naturally.
Right. It's representation.
Yes, for sure. For sure. So we have another topic of colorism and sizeism. Would you like to take that over, Nicole?
Yes, sure. So, I mean, obviously, that's just something that has been in the talks for a while, but we don't really talk about it enough. I think that's something that is very important to talk about. Kiana, I know you also delved into this a little bit. So if you want to talk about that, it's all yours.
Yes, I want to firstly thank Demetria Mosley, Danielle Young, Sophia Martin, Dr. Nicola Corbin, just for sharing their experiences with me and their insight in writing this story. And I truly learned so much from them about an issue that, like you said, Nicole, is really not talked about enough, but it affects so much. Like, it affects so many women, and it sparked something in this conversation. I remember in Dr. Nicola's interview, she was talking about how there was a documentary called Darker Girls. They came out in 2011. And part of her dissertation of the story was essentially going back and looking at comments from the documentary that came out in 2011 called Dark Girls. And she noticed that there was a light-skinned woman in the comments that basically said, this is not about you. And there's certain points where you have to really check your privilege and understand that, hey, there are people on this earth that have a different life experience than you, and that you should be listening to it and just really wanting to get an understanding of where they're coming from and how you can just help them just live better lives. Like I'm all about community building, and I'm all about just helping other people see that, you may not have it all figured out. You may have other things to learn and grow. And that's the beauty of being on this earth. So
right.
That was my favorite thing.
For sure. Yeah, well, I mean, I'll just say, like, personally, just like reacting to that subject matter, I do love that we're having this conversation because, I'm similar to you, Kiana, I'm all about, people just being themselves and just having the freedom to do that. I don't think there should be a pressure on, a person having to look a certain way or wear their hair a certain way or any of that. So I'm very glad that, we're highlighting this and, really talking about it. I think that's really great.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we talk about colorism, but something that also has to be addressed is sizeism. I mean, we hear about it, but we should be talking a little bit more about it. These pressures do exist, that people are expected to look a certain way. And if you don't meet that standard, if you're not a certain size, you may be oversized, told whatever it is that, you might not get the job, people are going to perceive you as a different kind of way. But, beauty comes in all shapes and sizes. We have to accept as they are. Yes, beauty comes in all shapes and different sizes, and that's just the reality of it. I mean, that's just how it is.
And you also have to understand that these standards, quote unquote, this mold was not made for us. Like, it was actually made in direct opposition to what we look like. So it's unrealistic, and it's ridiculous for people to we have to change who we are. We have to lose weight. Some people are bleaching their skin and so many different things just to fit this standard. And it's like, you are beautiful. You don't even know how incredible you are, and your skin and your hair and your size, just everything about you is beautiful. So I'm grateful for this conversation, and I'm grateful for the Crown Act, because coming up as a young journalist, we definitely need to make some strides.
For sure.
Definitely. And I feel like sometimes it's kind of, we should acknowledge that, like, I'm still working on it. I mean, for me, like, I struggle sometimes with, natural hair, being on air, having an on-air presence. Like, sometimes I have those thoughts in my head. I'm like, should I wear my hair this way? Should I wear that way? I've been told by colleagues of mine to not have, my natural hair on my reel, that my hair should be straight, it should be black, it should be pressed, so things that are in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, maybe do I really feel as confident with my natural hair? Like, how do I feel the most confident? So, sometimes there's still more work to be done, but, it's good to be having conversations like this, just to put it out there.
Yes, for sure. I think that's kind of the theme I hope for tonight, is that we're having these conversations and we're enlightening people with these conversations. So with that to come, still to come, we have Black journalists and mental health. We don't talk about it enough, but we're going to talk about it now. Also, Dorothy Tucker declares NABJ a safe space for queer people. We'll discuss that and the community reaction coming up. Plus, we'll hear from a Black student who attends Harvard University. We'll discuss what it's like to be a Black student at an Ivy League school. Don't go anywhere.
We are connected, engaged. From the moment we rise, we move, we adjust, we learn, explore, relax, and grow together. So we're ready to build a better tomorrow. Stay informed throughout your day with the Spectrum News app, exclusively for Spectrum customers.
Okay, welcome back Next up, we are going to talk about something that is very important, very relevant, and we can all relate to it, and that is the COVID vaccine. Now, I know that for me personally, I go to school in Philadelphia, I go to Temple University, and they have mandated now the vaccine for incoming students, and they have to get vaccinated per the city of Philadelphia by October 15th. Now we are bringing in reporter Samantha Cherry. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, I'm super excited to, get to talk about COVID vaccines.
Lovely, lovely. So yes, I know you were the reporter covering the story. So if you want to take this over, tell us what you were talking about. How was it? What you learned? We're all ears.
Yeah. So basically, the reason why I kind of picked this story was because, I go to the University of Florida. And even though, there's a high total COVID case count for the University of Florida, there's no mask mandate and there's no vaccine mandate going into school. So, it's a lot just based off of, the state and just the pressure to not have those kind of pandemic precautions. And so, I was wondering, what colleges and universities with vaccine mandates, how people were feeling about that. So basically, Chloe Godbold was able to talk to some University of Michigan students to kind of get their take on vaccine mandates that are there. And then I looked at some data from the Chronicle of Higher Education. And so they basically compiled all of the more than 700 colleges and universities that do have the vaccine mandates. And so I kind of looked for different patterns in, which schools were actually mandating vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, if I could bring you back for just a second. Well, first off, I don't know if you saw my reaction when you said you're from UF, because I'm from Florida and my family, they're huge Gator fans. So that's so cool. But second, I was going to ask, so I know you said at UF, it looks like you said that there isn't a mask mandate and there isn't a vaccine mandate. Yes, is that correct? Sorry.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so I was just wondering, how do you feel about that? Are you vaccinated yourself?
Yes, I'm vaccinated myself. And, I've definitely, been trying to encourage, my family and friends to also get vaccinated. So it's definitely, even with that, it's still, scary to think about, because, the University of Florida, it's in Gainesville, it's a college town, but, it's very much, this almost constant war between, this gigantic university and the people who live in Alachua County and, who are trying to, have their families and everything like that, in a college town. So there's definitely, there are obviously going to be people who will be vaccinated and wearing masks, but with it not being required, there are some people who, they, either will decide not to do one or the other or neither. And so there's definitely even a war within the students trying to, get people to wear masks and get vaccinated and kind of having that, as something that people are trying to push, even though it's not required.
I see.
Definitely. And it's interesting because you said between the students, it's kind of like a war. And I feel like there's always going to be that controversy. People are never going to agree on one specific thing over another. But something that I'm wondering, and that I think I'm noticing a pattern, I want to know if you've noticed it too, is this a regional thing? Obviously you're in the South, you're in Florida. I'm from Connecticut, I live in the North, and I go to school in the North. And it seems like, it's a little bit different. We have more mandates. We have the vaccine mandates in our school.
Interesting.
So do you think this is a Southern thing? Can you talk about it a little bit from a region perspective?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And, based off of the data that I was able to parse from the Chronicle of Higher Education, a really big thing was that a lot of the schools, the secondary schools that were mandating vaccines, a lot of them were in blue states. So, those states that voted for Joe Biden in the 2020 presidential election. And so, and also a lot of them are also private schools. So, with that, having like the democratic sort of, I guess, democratic leaning states, and also with the, in those private schools, they have a little bit more leeway in being able to, put those pandemic precautions in place without having, pressure from, a Republican leadership, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thank you for that insight. And it's really interesting.
Right. Yeah. And that definitely makes sense because so similar to Nicole, I'm also in Philadelphia and I go to the University of Pennsylvania, which is a private school. And like you said, it does have the vaccine mandate. Although interesting enough, they have made it optional for students to have masks. And similar to you and UF, there's definitely like a war amongst students on whether or not they'll be wearing their mask and whatnot. But yeah, so that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just gonna add real quick, Sheila, that I've been on Facebook and it's not pretty sometimes. The discussion in Facebook groups, it gets quite ugly. So yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was gonna just say, like, I don't know if you guys check like your respective like Reddit like profile or for like your schools and everything, because that's where it really goes down.
Oh yeah, I stay off of there. I know it gets like treacherous on Reddit. So
oh, that's so interesting. Now I'm curious. Now I need to go on Reddit and check it out for my school. Well, speaking about my school, so recently I wrote an article about being Black at an Ivy League. So those who don't know, University of Pennsylvania is an Ivy League. And so that's kind of what inspired my story. And so what I did was I interviewed students, alum, directors at cultural centers across these schools. In fact, we have a soundbite from a Harvard junior, Glenn Foster. We can go on and play that right now.
Imposter syndrome is something that is very, pertinent, especially amongst the students at Harvard, where we feel sometimes that we don't belong, or we're also in constant audition of ourselves, trying to prove that we earned our place, trying to prove that, we weren't just an affirmative action or a diversity point or a quota.
Yeah, so as you heard from that soundbite, kind of what Glenn talks about a lot in the interview is that many Black students at these schools feel imposter syndrome. They feel as if they have to work 10 times harder in order to prove themselves. And honestly, I feel like that's just very universal almost with being Black. I feel like we have to prove ourselves to people. I mean, can you guys relate to that? I know I definitely can.
100%. I mean, my school is a PWI, a predominantly white institution. And there's some times where I look around in my classes and I'm still the only Black person in there. So, I do have that sense of feeling like I have to prove myself. I have to work 3 times as hard, just because there's so many people who don't look like me. And I need to show that, people who look like me deserve to be in these spaces. So 100%, I think just being Black, and even you can even take this topic as just as being in higher education, like we deserve to be in these spaces. So I definitely can relate.
Right. And what's the demographics like for you, Samantha, at UF?
Yeah. So basically it's the Black population is actually really small at UF and it's actually shrinking. And so, the last I checked, there was 6%. It has a 6% Black population at UF. Wow. And so, especially because, just like, and by the way, there's, over 50,000 students that go to UF. So, trying to think of like how small that percentage is. Yeah. So it's, And, also kind of going to your point, Sheila, about, Ivy Leagues. And so, even like balancing kind of like, at least for me, like as I'm applying to grad school and I'm applying to different Ivy Leagues, I'm looking at, how big is kind of like their Black population, how included will I feel? And so, kind of thinking about, my experience with such a small Black population at UF, I'm definitely, considering that in, where I want to be and, basically how I want to be able to navigate the college experience.
Right, for sure. And one thing I'll say is that with all the students and alumni and directors I've interviewed, what all of them have said is that the reason why these Black students persevere is not only for themselves so that they can achieve their own dreams. they not only persevere for their communities back home, but they persevere for incoming Black students, because they want, there to be a day when a Black student can walk across any Ivy League campus if they choose to, and, just live and just go to school just to go to school. You know what I mean? Just like have that educational freedom where, they don't have to worry about people judging them because of their hair, because of their skin tone, none of that, and so I'm so glad that you bring that up, because that's exactly what a lot of those students had mentioned, which personally I was inspired by, because, you can have struggles such as that and become depressed over it. But it seemed like many of the Black students that I interviewed with, they actually use that as like a fueler, almost like a motivator. So just know that you're in good hands with these Black students at Ivy Leagues. Are really trying to, create a more inclusive environment for future students like yourself.
Yeah. And something I do want to add is, even just having like, organizations like NABJ to be able to connect to other, Black students, and and to be able to, get to talk about things that we all kind of understand and our similar experiences.
For sure.
Definitely. Well, we still have more to talk about. So coming up in our program, we'll hear from NABJ member Octavio Jones and get a glimpse of the horrors he saw while on the ground in Haiti. Also, some policy change and sensitivity training sessions later. Some NABJ members of the LGBT community are still unsatisfied. More on this after the break.
We can change this world for the better.
I'm just a ball player. You a hero.
We are the chosen ones.
We can change this world for the better.
I'm just a ball player. You a hero.
We are the chosen ones.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another great conversation. So today we have our superstar, Calen Razor. And the reason why I call him a superstar is because recently he wrote an LGBTQ plus task force article that was super huge on Twitter. It was huge on the website. So I'm so glad to have you with me, Calen. So first off, can you just tell us about this story?
Yeah, sure. So basically what I set out to do with this story is to come back 1 year later from a story that was produced last year based off a conversation that was sparked within the community, basically addressing their concerns within the NABJ, feeling like, there was homophobia, some discrimination against, queer members. So I wanted to come back with this story and basically find out how things have changed since last year, how policy has been enacted. And, I got a range of different opinions, and all of those opinions all, came to tell the story that NABJ has done work, but they still have work to do. And, it was very insightful to hear from all the different people. So, yeah.
I see. Gotcha. And so I had mentioned this at the beginning of the clip that your article went huge. Can you kind of just talk about like your reaction to that? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, so I was actually in the midst of working on another story, and then Lisa like popped into the breakout room and was like, "Calen, like, did you see that?" And I was like, "What? Like, what?" Like, and she was just telling me about the Twitter thread and all of that. I mean, it's really, I'm glad that it happened, to be honest, because I was nervous about, getting interviews and like having people say things about the organization that could be like, tricky. So my mentors really helped me in putting it together. So, I mean, I really appreciate everyone's help.
Well, I'll say this. I know when I heard, I was so excited, just because, I mean, you just talked about your story, but like, that's just such a fantastic topic. Just because I think it is very, like, we have to be very critical, like, although, it may be nice to be optimistic and say like, oh, things are great. Things are great. But, I think we definitely need to have conversations about, okay, so what are some concerns in the community? What can we do to address them? And like, what can we do moving forward? So that being said, what were kind of the main concerns that the LGBTQ plus community brought up?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, people thought that there was homophobia within the organization, people feeling like their work wasn't being as appreciated as other, non-queer members. And so in the past year, there's been, a range of different opinions from the community about how the organization has moved forward. So from members like Tre'vell Anderson, who is, a board member and also the task force co-chair, they feel like more in the community could be done. And I have a clip.
I have personally emailed my co-board members and told them my pronouns, told them how to use them in sentences, and I'm still misgendered every single time we meet.
So yeah, there are members who feel the same way as Tre'vell and the organization. They feel like while progress has been made on the outside looking in, from the sensitivity trainings to the policy changes, they feel like those changes are surface level and they don't really get into the deeper issues about queer issues that need to be addressed from all angles. It's not just a queer issue. I think that it's something that everyone needs to acknowledge as an issue for the organization as a whole and really put their all into it.
For sure. And so, so I'll say this, we have another superstar on the call, Whitney Hughes, not Whitney Houston, but Whitney Hughes. So Whitney, of course, we're all a part of this NABJ community. What are your thoughts to that? All that Calen's been talking about?
Absolutely. Well, we are the National Association of Black Journalists, and being Black journalists is, it's that community that we're all a part of, but I feel like being in this community together really allows us to bring our other identities into it, because we're all, we're not all just one, type of person. And I feel like equal representation in all aspects of your identity is very important. And that's why I think it's crucial to even have the LGBTQ plus task force and the efforts that they're working towards. But absolutely, I find that, as far as it's so important to be doing the work that NABJ is doing already in regards to the LGBTQ community, but there is more to do.
For sure. And, it's about holding your own accountable. That's very, very crucial.
Yes, sorry, Sheila, but I was gonna raise the same point. I think I think it's something that we turn to shy away from. A lot of people, they don't know what to say, they don't want to say the wrong thing, but it's important to have these conversations and to hold our own accountable. It's crucial. I mean, these are issues that need to be talked about, they need to be raised, and we have to, question these things and hold our own accountable. So yes.
I have to say, I'm a new NABJ member, and being here only a few months now, one thing I can definitely say is the organization really feels like a Black family reunion in a way. When it comes to the topic of sexuality, there's typically a wall when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community and the Black community, because many of them have roots in the church and the church's beliefs and stuff like that. So, there's the family members that open up to you from the beginning, and then the ones that take a little bit more time to, learn about it and what it means and how to, be respectful of that. So I think that's definitely mirroring, the organization right now. There are people who are, open and doing it, and then people who, aren't.
And so I know in this conversation, we've talked about some of the concerns of the community, but has there been any progress in any of the, did they mention any progress in any of the interviews that you had?
Yeah, so actually when I spoke to a founding member of the task force, Jerry McCormick, who is also the founding chapter president of the San Diego chapter, they gave me the perspective of someone who is a senior member of the organization and has had a lot of experience and has witnessed a lot more deeper issues than the ones we face today. So Jerry basically felt like Dorothy putting out a statement at all is progress for the task force. You can hear him talk about it here.
For the president of the organization to openly recognize and say that this is a safe space for LGBTQ members, I mean, that shows how far we've come in the 40 plus years since the organization has been in existence.
Yeah, so there's a lot of range in the opinion so far about, you know, how far we've come and how far we haven't come. But what I will say is that the organization and definitely the queer leaders within the community have been making themselves heard, putting themselves, you know, in positions to make change. The board currently has 2 queer members. So, you know, like them putting their voices out there is definitely inspiring as a new member.
Yay. So like moving forward, are you very hopeful?
I mean, yeah, I hope that, you know, I can see a time when the people who are on the forefront of the issue right now feel satisfied and feel like they've done enough for the community that, you know, younger journalists can come in and feel comfortable in the organization.
For sure.
Awesome. I actually have another question to ask you, Calen, because as you mentioned, this was kind of a follow-up story from something that happened last year. So my thoughts were kind of, why did you pick this as to follow up? And like, what does this story mean to you? What was your process?
Yeah.
So I personally identify with the LGBTQ plus community, and I felt coming in after reading the story last year, I thought that, you know, this is something that I could relate to and something that I would probably, you know, agree with, you know, the voices on. And, you know, getting to hear their perspectives and especially in a community like a Black association, I thought that I would be able to relate to them a lot and be a good person to tell their story. So I'm glad I got that chance to do that.
Yay. Well, I'll say this, like just hearing about your story, I'm so glad that it seems like people are trying to evoke more change in NABJ. They're trying to make it more inclusive and just trying to make it a better culture for, you know, Black journalists. And so speaking of Black journalists and kind of, you know, helping us and create a better culture, Whitney, I know you wrote a story about trauma talks, mental health. Can you kind of talk about that? And also like, what did that story mean to you as well?
Absolutely. Well, really, I wanted to go into, I knew that I wanted to do a story on mental health. In school, I studied journalism, but I also study psychology, and mental health is something that's very, very important to me. And so what I wanted to focus on was journalists don't have a lot of time to talk about themselves. It's not what they do. That's really not what we signed up for at all. And so I wanted to kind of turn the lens back on them and really talk about how some of the stories that they do, some of the stories that they cover affects them, you know, in their personal life, affects them mentally. I talked to lots of amazing journalists, and I've talked to lots of amazing mental health advocates and specialists to really come together and figure out, you know, what's working and what's not, and how to really amplify this conversation about mental health for journalists.
Right, for sure. Well, I'll say personally, I'm so glad that you brought up this topic because, you know, everyone on this call, we're all aspiring journalists. So I'm glad that, you know, we're bringing up this conversation of mental health, because I know, like personally, when I thought about the journalism field, immediately what I kind of thought about are all the pressing deadlines. And so that's already extremely stressful. But then on top of that, you know, like we've had, you know, the pandemic, everyone having to report from home. And on top of that, you know, we had the Black Lives Matter. And so, you know, you really had Black journalists who had to, you know, cover these things. And that must have been so hard. Like, I can't imagine. And, you know, so yeah, so I'm very glad that we're having this conversation, as you can see from the big smile on my face.
That's right. You know, and even before the pandemic and having to, you know, go through that trauma in and of itself, and before the Black Lives Matter movement, and having to deal with, you know, people reporting on police brutality, which was running rampant last year, it seems like. But even before all of that, there seems to be some type of responsibility for Black journalists to cover and report on, you know, trauma and tragedies in the Black community. There's more of a pressure or responsibility to tell those stories accurately. And that's what, you know, freelance reporter Nadra Niddle kind of talked to me about in her interview. And she talked about how, you know, her family was never happy with the representation of the Black community in media. And it's really a telling story because, you know, we haven't always been represented very well. And so all of that, having the pressure of wanting to report on our community accurately and in a way that, you know, it's gonna promote change, it's pressure and it's contributing to, you know, poor mental health at times. And if you're not, you know, taking active steps to taking care of yourself, then you can find yourself in a lot of trouble with burnout and anxiety and depression in this profession.
For sure.
This is something that, you know, I feel like as a student journalist that we should definitely have on our radar and like figure out methods from now of how to like approach these situations. When you were doing this story, like, did any coping mechanisms come up or any methods that they, you know, these more experienced journalists talked about on how to get through it?
Absolutely. I think that one of the overall general terms or ideas that these journalists had was to take breaks. Journalism, the field in itself is a lot. You're going to cover stories that you want to cover. You're going to cover stories that you don't. And a lot of things are going to be really hard on you. And so you have to know when to kind of take breaks for yourself, go on vacation, spend time with people you love and people who love you. And another really big thing was having an accountability partner or a support system that you can lean on, somebody that's going to come to you and say, hey, you're working too much, you're too involved in this story, you really need to step back and ground yourself in the present. And that's something that, you know, was talked about a lot in the interviews that I conducted.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And, you know, I mean, I know, like, of course, so Calen asked about like the advice that experienced journalists have or professional journalists, but like for you all, like, do you guys have any self-care tips or like mental health tips that you guys do in order to deal with the pressures of being a student journalist?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, for myself, like, I just have to listen to music. Music is like my sanctuary, you know?
Yeah.
My Spotify playlist, I got my playlist organized, I hit the speaker, and that is what de-stresses me and calms me down. You know, sometimes we really just have to put the phone down, put the phone away. Like, we're always on our phones, the excessive screen time, it's too much. So just, you know, really plugging out and just doing something that I truly enjoy. Even painting is another safe space for me, just to express myself in a different outlet and just kind of let my creativity flow. But definitely, like, it's just been a rough year. Obviously, I think we can all agree that on journalists, student journalists, reporters, it's been a rough year. So if we can just find little things that we can do just for a moment that can kind of take some of that stress away, like, I think that's so important for our mental health. So definitely. But what about you guys?
I painted a picture once. I wanted to say that because you said that you paint. I
paint too.
Painted a mushroom. It was very good. But one thing for me is hard stops. I think that being a student, you have to do things for grades, and sometimes I feel like that's even more pressure than you know, writing for, you know, covering a story that you just want to cover. And so when I say hard stops is when it comes around 11:30 and I'm frustrated and I'm not having, you know, I'm not in a good space mentally, I cut off. I'm like, I'm going to bed. If it's not done tonight, it won't be done tonight. I'll have to come back to this.
Right. I love that. And what about you, Calen?
I would say for me, definitely what helps me get through things is, you know, building or having a niche community of people that I can, you know, relate to and be around and talk about these things with, and they have the same experience as me. So we can, like, you know, just be like, you know what, everybody's got to go through this. Like, it's okay. Like, we're good. We're going to get through this. So yeah, definitely doing that.
Yeah. Well, I think if anything, I think all of that we've said is just, it's just a nice reminder that we really do have to check in on ourselves. I love the idea of having an accountability partner. I'm definitely going to bring that with me as I start college and the school newspaper all over again. So yeah, we just got to check in on each other. Maybe we can create a little accountability group amongst ourselves.
I would do that.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely just checking on one another and taking care of yourself. Prioritize your mental health. Mental health matters. Hashtag normalize mental health. All of that.
Definitely.
But again, we have to move on. So next coming up, we have an in-depth look at a network that is not your traditional newsroom. And a Black photographer gives his take on the events in Haiti. So stick with us.
We are connected, engaged. From the moment we rise, we move, we adjust, we learn, explore, relax, and grow together. So we're ready to build a better tomorrow. Stay informed throughout your day with the Spectrum News app, exclusively for Spectrum customers.
Welcome back, everyone. And thank you so much for sticking with us so far. Now we're going to talk about a kind of non-traditional newsroom. Did y'all know there's a Black news channel?
I mean, I knew. I'm the one who covered the story, but I don't know if you had a chance to watch. But yeah, the Black news channels, their focus really is to get deep into Black and Brown communities and cover it in ways that other communities or other news networks usually don't.
Let me introduce you before you even go off. Let me. So joining us, we have reporter Yabansu. So now that I've given your introduction, please tell us everything that you dived into with this.
Black news channel, it's a very unorthodox kind of way to approach news. I didn't know what it was until the story was presented to me by an NABJ mentor. But I think throughout my conversations with Dre Clark, who's a reporter, Sharon Reed, who's an anchor, and Princell here, who's one of the biggest, Black execs in all of TV, I think in my conversations with them, it really opened my eyes up to the way we approach Black news, and not even us as journalists, but other news networks as well. So I had the opportunity to sit down with all three and actually talk to them about this, and here's what they had to say.
I had one of my leaders, one of my executive team leaders, say to me a few months ago, the BNC is the first job that I've worked at that I don't have to leave my Black at the door. And that's a really, really powerful statement.
We do share clearly a common bond in the ways that we've been treated, the things that we've been subjected to. And so that part is just wiped away, and you get to just focus on the work and be great. And even if it means somebody says, I wouldn't do it that way, I'd do it this way, at least it's just about that and not more behind it.
I know there is a responsibility to get the story right now more than ever before. I know that I have a responsibility to my community to get the story right. I know that I have a responsibility to go the extra step to find those exceptional Black and Brown members of our community. And again, it just makes you more aware of who you are.
So the first bite you heard there was the president and CEO, Princell here. And I think the great thing that he mentioned is that one of his fellow employees came up to him and said, I don't have to leave my Black at the door, right? That's a thing that a lot of us experience. All the newsrooms I've worked in outside of NABJ student projects has been white dominated, right? So I think the fact that these employees at BNC feel empowered enough to not have to worry about anything. Sharon Reed alluded to it. Everybody goes through kind of the same thing. I think that kind of contributes to how powerful the Black news channel is, not only from an on-air standpoint, but behind the scenes aspect as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll say that I absolutely love that. I mean, earlier in the show, as everyone has seen, we talked about colorism, sizeism, natural hair. So I absolutely love that we have a news network like this where you don't have to leave your Black at the door.
Yeah, sorry for my lights there turning off.
No worries.
It kind of ties in all the issues we talked about throughout the broadcast. It kind of ties into the Black news channel in a way, right? Because you go from issues of sizeism, colorism, natural hair, to an environment where none of that matters. Everybody gets the same opportunity to shine on there, right? So I think that it's even more, emulate, and it kind of culminates everything that we were talking about throughout the broadcast.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Was there anything that you found doing your interviews that kind of stuck out to you most, or something that, really resonated with you?
I think it's everything that Drake Clark said, because we're talking about a guy who worked at the top news station in the top market in New York City. He was a reporter with ABC 7 Eyewitness News. So the fact that he went from there to NBC 10 Philadelphia and then completely switched course, you would never expect anybody to go from one of the top markets to another top market and then go to BNC, because Princell here, in my conversations with them, he mentioned how at first he had small market TV. And if you talk to any journalist, broadcast journalist, they don't want to stay in a small market forever, right? So I think having Drake Clark kind of say that his work with BNC is the most rewarding work he has done, that's what strikes me the most, because as I said, he's covered some of the biggest stories at some of the biggest stations. So the fact that a small market station at the start is where he's having his most rewarding experience, that strikes me the most. That was the biggest thing I took away in my conversations.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And just the point that we talked about, inserting this Black perspective and having that Black view. I mean, newsrooms across the country, like a lot of them aren't as diverse. So the fact that, we get to have that perspective mentioned is so important. I think that's something that is really cool, and that, I'm glad that exists, and I'm glad that it's out there and for people to see. Hopefully more people know about it. I know I didn't even know about the Black News Channel a few months ago, and I was like, wow, this exists. And, to learn about what they're about and what they stand for, I think is really, really great.
And so, of course, this isn't the only story you've covered. You've also covered a story about Octavio Jones, who was, a reporter in Haiti during everything that's happened. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I know the spotlight is on us considering we cover different stories, but the spotlight really should be on Octavio. He is a photographer, and he deep dove into Haiti. He's actually there right now. We got to speak to him earlier today about his experience, him photographing all of the people, what they're going through, how they look to recover from this natural disaster. And you can listen to the clip right here.
One of the guys there is like, his English is a little more proficient. He's like, oh, you're a photographer. Where are you from? It's like, I live in Florida. Oh man, this is great. This is great. You're here. This is great. And it just. Okay, I'm sorry.
So as you can see there, he could barely even finish his thought, because while he's there, I don't want to say people see him as a God figure in a way, but it's something that people don't see. They come up to him and say, where are you from? What are you doing? And the most interesting part, people hold up their numbers. They hold up their IDs. Usually you wouldn't ever hold up your ID to somebody because they could steal your identity, but they're doing it to him because they're saying, this is my name, this is my number, get me help. And there's nothing he could do except take photos, right? And that's kind of the emotional aspect of it. And that's something that really struck me while I was interviewing him.
Right. Well, so I'll say this, the reason why I wanted to go into journalism field is I'm a huge believer that stories can lead to a huge impact. And it seems like from that quote, like that's exactly like what, the person had mentioned, is that like, you may, because a photo is 1,000 words, and
right about
his work there is so meaningful. It's so meaningful. That must have been so great for those people to have someone like Octavio who cared, who flew from the US just to be there to tell their story. I think that's just definitely very awe-inspiring for me as, aspiring journalist.
And he said that's why he did it. He wanted to document all of the struggles that they're going through and hope that his photos can lead to some people helping these Haitian people out. And one interesting thing, you guys saw all the photos, it was 21 photos that he sent over to us, but there are times where he didn't even want to photograph what was going on. There was a 12-year-old that he saw urinating down a drain, right? And that's such a powerful thing for him to say, because, well, at least for me as a 12-year-old, I'm bugging my parents about, freaking getting Pokemon cards at Toys R Us or something. I don't think about, the day-to-day struggles that other people go through. So when I see and hear something like that, I kind of self-reflect in a way and say, well, am I going to complain about being hungry? Am I going to complain about somebody screaming at me? Am I going to complain about my back hurting? Something like that. I just say no, because as you can see, in another country, there are a bunch of people going through something that we can never imagine. I'm here, I get to use whatever bathroom at whatever facility, and then you have a 12-year-old girl peeing down the drain, and he couldn't even bring himself to take a picture of him.
Yeah, well, to echo your point, yeah, and kind of just on a personal note, just a quick story that I want to share. So my boyfriend is Haitian. He was actually born in Haiti, and his mom still is in Haiti. He has brothers and sisters that are currently on the island right now. And just a side note, I'm sure we all know that Haiti has been going through it. I mean, they had the giant earthquake years ago that shattered the island. They just had their president murdered. I mean, they are just struggle after struggle after struggle. And, you know, when I first heard the news about what had happened, I mean, it was just complete shock. You know, I was like, is your family okay? What's going on? You know, like, it's so much going on. And so when I would talk to my boyfriend about it, I was like, you know, like what's going on, what the people need, like what stories need to be told from them? What do they want people to know? Right. And just like, we want our voices to be heard. We need people to know what's going on here, how they can help. So to the point of Octavio, just the fact that he was there, someone who could tell their stories, you know, that he was someone who cared, that they were happy that he was there. All of that, I think, was definitely just so rewarding. And so it was just so good that he was there to do that. So for sure.
You got it.
Well, no, I was just going to mention, I mean, we know, but maybe the viewers don't know, is that Octavio is actually an NABJ baby. And not only is he that, he's an NABJ member, but he's also was an alum of the Student Multimedia Project. And so I think, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I mean, I'm already inspired by him. But then even to know that he was an alumni of this exact project, I mean, it's truly amazing, awe-inspiring. And I'm so thankful that, you know, we get to talk about his work today.
And it kind of teaches you to pay it forward, right? Because he learned to perfect some of his craft through student projects, and then through the same program, we're learning from him how you can use your career to really impact people's lives. Through journalism, through our words, whether you write them, type them, say them on camera, take a photo of it, say it on the radio, whatever it is, you're able to tell the stories of whether it's one person or 1,000 people or an entire country.
This is the site where the hotel, that 4-star hotel, collapsed. These buildings will continue to fall, you know, but again, they still, because of what they have and their resources and materials, they have to keep building. Yeah, this is at the side of the building. This guy was doing what he can to clean. They was trying to clean up the area. He said, "This is our neighborhood. You know, we may not have much, but we're going to, we're going to clean."
this was such a great conversation. We covered so many important topics, and it was just great to do it with you guys. So thank you to all our guests who are on the show today. Thank you for you guys for being here. It was amazing. And I just want to extend the thank yous to all of the students, our colleagues who worked on this NABJ student project with us. It was an honor to work with you guys and everyone else involved. I have to extend a thank you to our mentors, our NABJ founders, and the organization as a whole for just allowing us to be here and do the work that we do. I mean, without them, there is no us. So a huge thank you for them. And just to plug ourselves yet again, you can check our work out on the NABJ Monitor and our other broadcasts from day 1 and day 2 on our YouTube. Don't want to miss it. There are also some more great stories over there. So again, thank you all so much.
Yes. So on behalf of Yao Bonsu, Nicole Majette, and myself, Sheila Hodges, and also on behalf of all the other people who participated in the 2021 NABJ Student Multimedia Project, thank you so much for tuning in. And we hope to see you next year in person in Las Vegas for the next convention. See you all next year. Bye.